Charles Leclerc uncovered shocking irregularities inside Hamilton's SF25 just days before Singapore. What he found confirmed Hamilton's simulator revelations were not theory, but reality built into the car. Ferrari's simulator flaws had forced Hamilton to create radical configurations that Leclerc saw firsthand. Now Ferrari faces a storm, 2 drivers, 1 team, and scandal that could reshape their entire future. Baku revealed Ferrari's contradictions in full. On Friday, Lewis Hamilton was convinced pole position was within reach. By Saturday, he was eliminated in Q2. By Sunday, he dragged the SF25 to 8th, exposed by tire degradation and poor balance. That collapse was not about one bad lap or one wrong call. It was systemic. The simulator in Maranello had painted a Ferrari that did not exist, and Hamilton had paid the price. Charles Leclerc, watching from the other side of the garage, knew something did not add up. When Leclerc reviewed Hamilton's data, the scandal came to life. The setups in Hamilton's car bore no resemblance to what Ferrari's simulator or engineers had prescribed. Suspension geometry softened for curbs, cooling recalibrated for humidity, and aero balances reshaped for stability, all decisions Ferrari's systems never suggested. These were Hamilton's inventions, crafted from hours of deciphering a simulator that lied. Leclerc realized he was not just seeing tweaks. He was seeing rebellion in motion. The raw numbers confirmed it. Hamilton had turned Ferrari's most expensive mistake into a weapon, using false predictions as warnings to build real-world solutions. The car that crossed the line in Baku was not Ferrari's car. It was Hamilton's Ferrari. For Leclerc, this was a revelation. He had been driving the version Ferrari wanted him to. Hamilton was driving the version Ferrari never imagined. And the gap between them was growing wider with every kilometer. The scandal was bigger than performance. It struck at the core of Ferrari's identity. For decades, the Scuderia prided itself on engineering supremacy, its cars a blend of passion and precision. Now its simulator was exposed as unreliable, its systems outdated, and its salvation dependent on a driver who rewrote the rules himself. Leclerc, long Ferrari's chosen son, found himself standing in a garage where his teammates' rebellion had become Ferrari's only hope. It was a destabilizing discovery. Singapore raised the stakes higher than ever. If Hamilton's radical setups worked, Ferrari could fight for its first real podium in months. But that success would belong to Hamilton's instinct, not Ferrari's machinery. If it failed, the humiliation would be complete, proving that not even Hamilton's genius could salvage the Scuderia's decline. For Leclerc, the dilemma was acute: support Hamilton's methods and risk his own status, or resist and watch Ferrari collapse further. Baku was supposed to be the moment Ferrari showed resilience. Lewis Hamilton topped free practice, his voice confident that for the first time all season, pole position was within reach. The optimism was contagious. Even Charles Leclerc admitted the car looked sharper than in previous weekends. But qualifying told a different story. Hamilton was dumped out in Q2, stranded in 12th place, his frustration audible. The promise of pace had been nothing more than smoke. And as Ferrari stumbled again, suspicion grew that something deeper was wrong. On race day, Hamilton clawed his way to 8th, but was not the drive of a man with a car beneath him. The SF25 slid through corners, chewed tires far earlier than strategy predicted, and left him fighting the car as much as rivals. Ferrari's simulator had promised stability and tire life. Instead, Hamilton wrestled with instability and degradation. For Leclerc, watching from the other side of the garage, the gap between forecasts and reality was impossible to ignore. After the weekend, Leclerc asked to review Hamilton's car data. What he found stunned him. There were configurations inside Hamilton's SF25 that were never suggested by Ferrari's engineers or simulator. Suspension geometries softened for curbs, cooling strategies adjusted for humidity, and aero balances tuned not for speed, but for predictability. These were not Ferrari's standard prescriptions. They were Hamilton's own inventions, crafted from hours of punishing simulator work. For Leclerc, it was the first time he realized his teammate was driving a car redefined by rebellion, not by Maranello. The revelation shook him. Ferrari had frozen development, focusing on 2026, leaving the SF25 static. Yet Hamilton had refused to accept that. He had inverted Ferrari's simulator lies and turned them into radical setups. Leclerc realized that the Ferrari he was driving and the Ferrari Hamilton was driving were no longer the same machine. One was built on tradition. The other was built on defiance. And that divergence threatened to crack the team open. For Leclerc, the discovery was personal. He has long been Ferrari's chosen son, the man around whom the Scuderia planned its future. Yet in Hamilton's garage, he saw a different reality. The car in front of him bore the fingerprints not of Ferrari's engineering teams, but of a driver refusing to bow to flawed systems. It was both genius and threat. Genius, because Hamilton had found a way to keep Ferrari alive. Threat, because it risked leaving Leclerc in his shadow. And so the scandal sharpened. Ferrari's simulator was not just a technological embarrassment, it had become the catalyst for a civil war. Leclerc's discovery inside Hamilton's car changed everything. Singapore would no longer just be about points. It would be about philosophy, about whether Ferrari trusted its machines or its drivers. The lights of Marina Bay would not only illuminate a race, they would expose the truth of a team divided. This is only the beginning. Hamilton's own words in Baku cut through the noise. I felt like I could fight for pole today. I have not felt that all year. For seven-time champion, those words carried enormous weight. He was not exaggerating. He believed Ferrari had given him the tools at last. But when qualifying ended with him stuck in 12th, the sense of betrayal was heavy. Leclerc, who had seen his teammates' optimism firsthand, could not understand how potential had dissolved so quickly. That confusion led him to look closer at Hamilton's car. On Sunday, Hamilton salvaged 8th, but the data betrayed the struggle. Tires overheated laps earlier than predicted, balance shifted unpredictably mid-corner, and traction out of slower sections evaporated. Ferrari's simulator had forecast-long stints and stable grip. Reality delivered the opposite. Leclerc compared his own telemetry to Hamilton's and noticed a strange divergence. Hamilton was compensating for flaws Leclerc had also felt, but in ways the team had never briefed. The post-race technical review confirmed Leclerc's suspicions. Hamilton's SF25 was running suspension settings that had not come from Ferrari's engineers. He had adjusted geometry to tame curbs and added balance shifts to stabilize the rear. Tire temperatures were being managed differently too, with cooling strategies tuned outside of Ferrari's prescribed windows. It was as if Hamilton was running a different philosophy entirely. For Leclerc, the data was shocking. His teammate was not just driving differently, he was driving something fundamentally different. Hamilton's resilience masked the truth. By improvising, he had kept Ferrari from total collapse in Baku. Leclerc realized that his 8th place was not a fair reflection of the car's true weakness. It was evidence of Hamilton's ability to extract order from chaos. Ferrari's systems had promised pace. Hamilton had delivered survival. And buried in the telemetry, Leclerc saw proof that his teammate had effectively out-engineered the team. The discovery left him both impressed and unsettled. The outside commentary added weight to Leclerc's doubts. Jacques Villeneuve had been brutal. Ferrari is completely lost. Hamilton played it well. Initially, Leclerc had dismissed it as harsh punditry. But looking at the numbers, he could see Villeneuve's point. Ferrari's simulator was producing ghosts, setups that looked logical but collapsed in reality. Hamilton was surviving not because Ferrari had helped him, but because he had outthought Ferrari's failures. For a driver like Leclerc, who has grown up inside Ferrari's system, this was a devastating realization. And so the raw data became more than numbers. It was the evidence of a divide inside Ferrari's garage. On one side was Leclerc, following the institutional path, relying on Maranello's simulator and engineers. On the other was Hamilton, rebelling, bending flawed data into his own weapon. Leclerc's discovery made it clear Ferrari's future was being redefined not by its systems, but by the instincts of a single man. For the first time, Leclerc felt what it meant to share a team with Hamilton, and it was unsettling. At the center of Leclerc's discovery was Ferrari's broken simulator. The multi-body mathematical model, built to replicate the SF25's behavior, was riddled with inconsistencies. It promised stability under braking, only for the car to slide. It forecast tire longevity, only for degradation to set in after a handful of laps. It projected aero balance that vanished when fuel loads dropped. For years, Ferrari had built their weekends around this tool, trusting its numbers as gospel. Now, Leclerc was staring at proof that Hamilton had treated it not as guidance, but as a puzzle to be solved. What stunned Leclerc was Hamilton's method. Instead of rejecting the simulator, Hamilton inverted its logic. Where it suggested understeer would be manageable, he expected it to be worse. Where it promised grip on exit, he assumed instability. Each false prediction became a warning. Leclerc saw that Hamilton had not followed Ferrari's playbook at all. He had written his own, based on an instinct honed across 2 decades at the sharp end of Formula One. The simulator sessions explained everything. Hamilton had logged hours, sometimes as many as 12 in a single stretch, testing variables that Ferrari's engineers overlooked. He dissected suspension stiffness under curb strikes, recalculated tire behavior in extreme humidity, and studied aero loads in low-speed sequences. Every time the simulator lied, Hamilton mapped the lie and built a correction. Leclerc, reviewing the data, saw a library of adjustments that made sense only to someone who had experienced those failures on track. Hamilton had created a personal translation between Ferrari's virtual car and reality. The focus was Singapore, the most unforgiving circuit on the calendar. 19 corners, relentless heat, and a distance that demands precision from both driver and machine. The simulator struggled, even in its best years, to replicate Marina Bay. For Hamilton, the flaws became an advantage. Leclerc found suspension softened to absorb curbs, cooling strategies recalibrated to prevent thermal runaway, and aero balances tilted toward predictability rather than peak speed. These were not Ferrari's official solutions. They were Hamilton's. The car in his garage was more than a Ferrari, it was a rebellion. To the engineers, Hamilton's configurations looked illogical. Who sacrifices top speed in favor of mechanical stability? Who reduces aero efficiency deliberately? Yet, in Leclerc's analysis, the logic was undeniable. Hamilton was not chasing a perfect Ferrari. He was building a survivable one. His setups were designed to fight through Singapore's corners lap after lap, even if it meant giving up a few kilometers per hour on the straights. It was a philosophy that put control and consistency above all. For Leclerc, that was a revelation and a warning. And so the scandal widened. Leclerc realized that Hamilton had transformed Ferrari's simulator from a crown jewel into a source of humiliation. By exposing its flaws and bending them into his own advantage, Hamilton had proven that instinct could still outthink machines. The SF25 Leclerc drove was Ferrari's vision. The SF25 Hamilton drove was Hamilton's creation. The difference was not theoretical, it was real, written in the car's DNA. And that changed everything for both Ferrari's future and Leclerc's place within it. The dramatic twist for Charles Leclerc was the realization that Ferrari's SF25 was effectively frozen in development. Resources had already been diverted toward the 2026 project, meaning no upgrades, no breakthroughs, and no cavalry from Maranello. What Leclerc found inside Hamilton's car was not the result of new parts, but of radical reinterpretations of existing ones. It was Hamilton's rebellion against Ferrari systems that gave the car its edge. For Leclerc, this was a revelation and a threat. Singapore magnified the stakes. It is a track where instability cannot be hidden and where tire degradation exposes every weakness. If Hamilton's radical setups worked, they would not just carry Ferrari forward, they would validate his methods and undermine the systems Leclerc had trusted for years. Suddenly, Leclerc was caught in a paradox. Supporting Hamilton meant admitting his own path had been flawed. Opposing him meant risking Ferrari's only shot at redemption. Hamilton's Singapore package was unlike anything Ferrari had imagined. Softer suspension to absorb the punishing curbs, cooling systems adjusted to battle Marina Bay's humidity, and aero balances tilted towards stability rather than outright speed. These were not setups Ferrari's simulator ever suggested. They were Hamilton's fingerprints all over the SF25. For Leclerc, the data was undeniable. The car in Hamilton's garage was not Ferrari's design, it was Hamilton's creation. That discovery left Leclerc questioning not just his teammate, but his own standing inside the team. The political implications inside Maranello were explosive. Ferrari had built Leclerc into its long-term plan, its chosen son for the future. Yet the reality Leclerc saw was a team surviving thanks to Hamilton's ingenuity, not Ferrari systems. If Hamilton succeeded in Singapore, it would force Ferrari to accept his rebellion as the way forward. That would tilt the balance of power inside the team away from Leclerc, leaving him in the uncomfortable position of chasing a teammate who had reinvented Ferrari's philosophy. For Leclerc, the emotional impact was enormous. He has always defined himself as Ferrari's future, the driver who would lead them back to glory. But now he was staring at evidence that Ferrari's survival depended not on him, but on Hamilton. It was a blow to his pride and his identity. Sharing a team with a legend is one thing. Watching that legend outthink the team itself is another. Leclerc knew that Singapore would test not just Hamilton's setups, but his own resilience. And so the twist sharpened. Ferrari's simulator scandal was no longer a technical embarrassment. It had become an existential crisis for the team's unity. Leclerc's discovery turned the issue into a question of loyalty. Should Ferrari embrace Hamilton's rebellion, risking Leclerc's role as their foundation, or reject it and face humiliation on track? The drama of Marina Bay was now as much about the politics of Ferrari's garage as the lights on the circuit. For Leclerc, this was not just about points, it was about survival within his own team.